Okay. So there once was a kid who liked to crawl under tables. And when this was happening, it was a different time and a different era. And they were crawling under a table at a holiday. And one of the people at the table, this is not a story about myself. This is a fable. I didn't like to crawl under tables. They were at a holiday with their family, and they were crawling under tables because that's what they did. And someone was smoking, like back in the day, you smoked at holidays. And they took their cigarette and they were holding it, and they didn't know that the kid was down there, and it got onto their skin and burnt them.
Oh.
It's a fable. It's sort of, whose fault is it? Whose fault is this?
Kind of both of their faults.
Why does there have to be fault?
That's a good question. If somebody gets burnt or an accident happens, and people have made decisions that lead to that, I think if we don't like the word fault, I can change it to what was the cause? What could have changed for this not to happen?
Well, the parents should take responsibility for their children, by golly.
Yeah.
I think the man shouldn't have been smoking at the table.
Well, we know that now. So in 2024, looking back into retrospect, we know that you shouldn't smoke at the table. And I remember at some as a kid, if you go back before that, I think I've seen family 8mm where everybody was just chugging away in the back. That's just what people did.
It was a big cloud of smoke.
Yeah.
Up above everything.
Yeah, and that was just what people did, and I know we can talk a lot about how that's not good for people, but people were in a different place and they did that. And then it's the question of
if you're aware that your child crawls under the table all the time, you do one of two things: you keep them at family gatherings, you put under the table is off limits, or you let everybody know, hey. Just a note. It's not the dog you're feeling under there. It's little Harry.
Yeah, if just because a kid wants to crawl underneath the table and has the habit of it, like when at a family gathering, might you say, "Not today"? It's not like their survival depends on their ability to crawl under the table. Like we could just be like, "We know you like it, but we're going to take a break today."
It's not healthy under the table with all those shoes with dirt and bacteria.
Or with all those guys whipping cigarettes around, right?
That was the norm. What you're really asking for.
I had a lot of people in my family that smoked when I was young. Uncles and stuff. Mm-hmm. But they never smoked at the table. They always left the table and smoked somewhere else.
I think we have in 2024, I think we've had it for 10 years at least, and I think we're going to have it for a long time moving forward, an epidemic of responsibility. We don't understand responsibility anymore. I didn't say lack of, although that's one angle of it. I would also contend that we have a lot of taking responsibility for things that isn't our responsibility. I think there's a lack of, and then there's also being shouldered on to things that are like we're trying to fix somebody, and it's, we're kind of in their business trying to fix them all the time, and taking responsibility, and maybe that should be a thing that they have to answer for. Maybe God should speak to them through it instead of us trying to get in the middle there. A little bit of both. Can you all tell me where in the Bible the idea of responsibility and how to use it responsibly? What verses can we look up? The word responsibility never appears in the Bible, ever. The word responsibility is absent from the Bible. There's no verse that says thou shalt be responsible, or Jesus said, let me teach you about responsibility. That doesn't mean that there aren't things in the Bible that inform responsibility. Discipline. So remember that I'm Lutheran, and I've told people I will teach this in very Lutheran ways, and if you don't like it, that's fine. I'm very biased. It's very Lutheran. The Bible does talk about law and gospel. The law can never save us. The law always tells us that we need saved. The law is the thing that condemns us. It's the thing that tells us what we should have been doing and didn't do, or should be doing better. Jesus is the one that saves us. The law is the one that tells us you can't do this on your own, which is a hint about responsibility. The law constantly tells us, I'll do a sermon on the Beatitudes. Luther's commentary on the Beatitudes is nobody can do this. That's the law. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It means you can't do it. You cannot fulfill the law. You and I, none of us, we're sinful. This is why we have confession at the beginning of every service. The law condemns us. It tells us what we deserve. The gospel tells us Jesus loves us anyway. But that's a discussion about responsibility, though. The law does talk, there is the talk in the Bible of discipline, of responsibility, of what the laws are, or what the expectations are. Can we fulfill the law for somebody else? We cannot be responsible for other people. I would say we live in a time of complete confusion over lack of responsibility. Like, the law is not for me. I don't want to be condemned by the law. I don't want to hear this. And then on the alternative side, I think we take responsibility all the time for things that people have done, that the law should condemn them. And I'll give an example of what I mean by that. I'm not going to say who or where, but you'll remember this. Just last time that we got together, we talked about interaction with somebody that the person, I'm headed into church, you're welcome to come in. We talked about this last week. And we said, I'm a good person. I know where the chaplain, the person said to I'm good, but I don't go to church. At what point is it our responsibility to talk about, well, you're not that good as you think you are? And sometimes we live in a place where it's easy maybe even to get behind a keyboard. Not saying anybody here, I'm just giving examples. These are all sort of fables to think about. You get behind a keyboard and it's easy to start taking on people's responsibility. You cannot fulfill the law for your kids, grandkids. That's hard as a parent to think about. The law is for me and it's for my kids. I can try to teach them the law, but at the end of the day, I can't make the decision that follows the law. They have to.
Well, it's being judgmental.
Judgmental is part of it.
And we are not to be judgmental. I mean, we're just...
Ecclesiastes plays around with the idea of responsibility and taking more of it than you're supposed to. And I'm going to look right at the book of it. We haven't really done that a lot. I'm going to talk about it. I talked last time and I gave a lot of material about it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it unless you have questions. About the scribe tradition in the world that Jesus lived in and the world that Ecclesiastes was written in. Scribes are lawyers. They're about the law, and they're about who has responsibility for what. Like if an accident happens, whose fault is it? And whose insurance has to pay? I mean, they're not talking about cars, but I'm basically, the scribes were people who tried to take God's work in the world and turn it into who's responsible for what. They were spending a lot of time on trying to be responsible. And I talked some last time about Koheleth, the author of Ecclesiastes, sort of posing as a scribe to be sort of sarcastic about it. And so we're going to look at the famous Ecclesiastes, because why not? If you're going to talk about Ecclesiastes, let's pull out the most famous Ecclesiastes thing there is. And I'll talk about what it's saying about responsibility and law and human wherewithal, and then what it's saying about who God is. So it's the third chapter of Ecclesiastes, and you all know it. I mean, you could sing the song, You've been to funerals, weddings. You've been to people's houses where this is posted up on the wall or whatever. You know this one. Let's do 1 through 8. It's beautifully written, right? That's why we love it. Let's do 1 through, and how about if someone other than me reads it, so then you don't have to listen to me.
I'll read it.
All right, 1 through 8.
There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace.
All right, what do you hear in there? I have a lot I'm going to talk about in this section, but first I want to hear what you all hear and see. I think it's a little counterintuitive that it says there's a time to hate. Mm-hmm. So there's deeper meaning to what that's saying than what we think. What all do you hear in that?
I kind of hear that no matter what we do, time is going to pass. And we don't have so much control over it. It's not us that's going to have the control. God has the control.
Yeah, where's human agency or human wherewithal or responsibility in this?
There really isn't any in there.
It's saying that this stuff is going to happen no matter how well you follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
It's wisdom and the teacher telling you that wisdom isn't going to solve the problem. That's a statement on responsibility. You cannot be responsible enough to stop the cycle of the way things go. The way this is written is it rotates in between like a ticking clock, back and forth between two things, right? And then there's multiples of them. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there's reasons why there's the amount of them there are. Some of them mean some things like throwing away stones and gathering stones. Could mean things like they could have used, there's thought that maybe stones were used to keep accounting, like a computer basically, like how do I remember how much this person owes me? I'll have a symbol of a stone, throw them away. It could be a financial, there's all sorts of sort of stuff going on here. It's talking about human agency. It's wisdom, posing as wisdom, saying that no matter how smart, no matter how responsible, no matter how good you are, this clock is going to keep getting you. It's telling us that we are creatures. Remember all the way back in Genesis, God created the heavens and the earth and everything in the land and the seas, and then brought forth vegetation and brought forth the animals and made humans dominant over the animals and said you should name them. Here it's basically saying you're a victim of you're no better than any other animal that has time that goes by. And other places in Ecclesiastes is going to say you're going to die just like every animal dies. And you cannot be responsible enough to stop it. Remember I've talked about how it's sort of ironic. How do we talk about, how do you go into that house where the kid crawls under the table and the uncle burnt the kid and sort of sort through who's responsible? If you start saying, why is that kid under the table? It's going to make for a great gathering, right? Or if you say, how come Uncle Joey's always smoking at the table? How do you talk about, if we're just more responsible, this stuff wouldn't happen? Sometimes we avoid it altogether, like, we can't fix it, so we're going to lack of responsibility. Other times we're like, well, I'm going to go talk to Uncle Joey and tell him how he should stop smoking, and this should be a wake-up call, and we're taking responsibility for his decisions, right? There's that. Ecclesiastes is talking about the absolute death of a person and our inability to be responsible enough to stop what's going to happen to us. The law always condemns us. There's no amount of wisdom or scribe keeping or anything that is going to stop this. So why bother? If you can't stop it from happening, why? That one I'll write down because I'll answer that one in a few minutes. I'm going to go off on a tangent before I get to why bother. What's missing from this list? It sort of runs the spectrum: a time to be born and a time to die in verse 2. It covers a lot of things. What's missing? There is one huge omission. It's giant, huge, glaring omission.
They're not mentioning God per se.
There's no mention of a time to worship, a time to pray, there's none of that. Because it's not.
I read that between the lines.
Do you? Where is it?
But I guess because I know.
Yeah, but
It's a part of
when you know
study,
things,
it's
though,
like
you don't.
It's kind of in between there. I mean,
When
you're
you know
supposed to be acknowledging that part.
I would say that you're not supposed to be acknowledging it here. That it's vacant on purpose. That it's missing on purpose. These are the things that we try to have wisdom and responsibility in. These are the things that are going to get us nowhere. Worship, we would say, is going to get us somewhere. So that's why it's not in the list. There is no mention here of there's a time to repent. We like to tell people, if you prayed more, you'd be better off. If you repented, you'd be better off. There is no religious thing here. What we as religious people like to do is slip into the idea that because we're religious, it's in everything. But a lot of our lives are spent on a time to get our car fixed and a time to not be able to afford it. A time to go to the doctor and a time to ride out the pain. We spend a lot of time on this stuff. And we think we're wise and we think we can navigate it. Ecclesiastes is purposely taking on the voice of wisdom and telling us that wisdom fails us.
I have something here I'd like to share with
Yeah.
you. It's the little margin. It says, all of life is a summation. Let me start over. All of life is summarized by the phrases grouped in two sets of 7 opposites. 7 was considered a number symbolizing completeness. To read that, you'd think they've covered everything that they need to cover, and it is complete.
But they're doing that on purpose because of how easily we... let's take it into the story of Jesus in the Gospels. Who are the people who identify Jesus as who he is? Predominantly. Not always, but predominantly in the Gospels. Who are the people who are able to identify Jesus as God's Son?
The apostles.
The disciples do not. They hope he is, but it takes them a long time to figure it out. There's characters in the Gospels that get it like this.
I think there are evil spirits.
The evil spirits get it every
Right
time.
away.
Every time. The people needing healed get it every time. The sinners, the prostitutes, the scribes, and the Pharisees, who are the religious people, do not get it. You get Nicodemus, who is a religious person, and he's intrigued, but he won't come out during the day and say, "I'm coming. I accept Jesus as who he is."
I swear I muted that.
Right? So predominantly, I'm not saying in every single case, but predominantly the Gospels are a story of the people who don't get it, who should get it. The prayerful, religious people who know all the rules, who Jesus goes right in front of them and they can't figure it out.
That's expectation. they were expecting someone different than Jesus.
And so to put that into what I'm talking about here, what if, and this is a what if, like a generic what if we're so busy worrying about how responsible other people are that Jesus could sit right next to us and we wouldn't see it?
Very believable.
What if we're so worried about avoiding responsibility that Jesus, who would talk about it right next to us, we would be like, oh, that's not on me. That's, we talked about how we live in this time where everybody either takes a lot or takes none. How often could we be so worried about people's doing our neighbor's responsibility to follow all the rules that Jesus could walk right down the street, but we're so caught up in the neighbor issue that we wouldn't see it? He's telling, Ecclesiastes is written by a person who has a name connected to being a scribe, and is saying, I'm really wise, I really know this law, and then is, by being really wise, telling you, none of your wisdom is what saves you. The law cannot save you. The law tells us how we should act, and God sends the law, and it does condemn us. But that's not what saves us. All that sort of makes sense? I've been talking about how this is an ironic, sarcastic book. Anything else you want to talk about with this part? There's another section that, depending on how much time we have, we'll look at another. All of Ecclesiastes is like this. But before I go to it, I'm not going to leave it here, because Ecclesiastes does not leave it here. Ecclesiastes immediately follows this with text that is informative. So it follows, we stop the song. I think the birds sing this song, and I think they stop at verse 8. But the big verses are right after it. I've been saying this a lot lately. I don't know, like, people are going to be like, man, he's really on this. And I don't even know why I'm on it so bad. This has got to be I said it in the sermon Sunday. I've said it in preparing for Sunday the last 2 weeks. I did not say it in here, but I'm going to say it in here now. You are way better off when you do not pay attention to chapters and verses. Mm-hmm. You are way better off. I don't know if you picked up on this Sunday. I tried to say it Sunday, but I don't know that I had a great explanation of it. But the way the story of the Beatitudes is, people are coming to him for healing. And then it says, out of those people are becoming this great crowd that follows them. And then it says he asked the crowd to sit down and says to them, blessed are the ones that mourn. And he's being followed by people who were the mourners. Blessed are the ones who are weak. And these are the very people. But we cut the Beatitudes so that when we have them read, we don't hear that part of who the crowd is, because the chapter cuts right there. So we don't read that. Jesus is looking at the people who have been healed and saying, blessed are you for being healed, for having been sick. I mean, that's a different thing than the way we talk about it. So here, the birds did us a disservice because they sing up to verse 8, and then they probably have some sort of chorus, like turn, turn, turn. They just cut right to the chorus. The big verses here are and I'm going to read them. I'm going to read starting in 9. What gain have the workers from their toil? Now I'm going to write myself a quick note there, and then I'm going to come back. I have seen the business that God has given to everyone to be busy with. He has made everything suitable for its time. Moreover, he has put a sense of past and future into their minds. Yet they cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I know there is nothing better for them than to be happy and enjoy themselves as long as they live. Moreover, it is God's gift that all should eat and drink and take pleasure in all their toil. I know that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done this, so that all should stand in awe before him. That which is already has been. That which is to be already is. And God seeks out what has gone by. think of the word responsibility. Responsibility, judgment, the power, the authority in this is God's. God has done it. God has already done it. God time ticks for us as creatures, and we get sidetracked in all this stuff. We don't even see that the thing's missing proper worship all the time. And a proper attitude is remembering that God is the wise one, and God is the one that gives us what we have, and God cares for us. That's a grace thing after the law. Those verses back there are graceful. And then it talks about enjoying creation. This, man, I feel like so Lutheran thinking about this and talking about this. How can we have a Lutheran night at the brewery? How can we do that? Because in the midst of all these laws that condemn us, our faith resides in a God who reigns and who cares for us and who has given us creation. There are laws about how to enjoy alcohol properly. There's rules, there's laws in the Bible about overconsumption. We know all that. It doesn't say don't drink it at all. When you believe that God, when you have a proper alignment on who's responsible for what, you're enjoying the thing that you get, that God hands you that day. When you're worried about taking responsibility for other people, which I do that all the time for my kids. This is not like look at you and be mad at you. I mean, we all do this. Like we treat kids now like they can't take responsibility for anything. Like we make all their decisions for them, right? I mean, this is what we do with kids. When we do that, we're not setting them into, they're able, God has given them the ability and the strength to be prayerful, to be repentant, to know Jesus, and to make law-filled choices. But we like to make them, we get so preoccupied with all that wisdom that we forget where wisdom belongs.
And then they get to be adults and they can't do any of that. They
Well,
can't
neither can
make
we.
decisions.
It isn't just, and I'm not even going to point fingers at kids. We can't either. I mean, this is going to sound like I'm resigned, but like we talked this morning about various people's medical appointments and things. I believe that no amount of our wisdom is going to get us past the ultimate thing of where all that medical stuff is going to end. It all ends for us in the same place. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but I think we think that we can. I think there's part of us that's like we can navigate all this, and be okay and be fine, and our wisdom and we can take responsibility for ourselves, and Ecclesiastes with 3 spends 8 verse kind of telling you that you're nothing more than a creature at the whims of this big machine around you. And then it tells you that if you want to get to the part that's blessed and fulfilled, it's to believe that God has given you that moment and to, in his words, eat, drink, and be merry, right? That doesn't mean we know gluttony is a sin. We know over-drinking is a sin. Does all this make sense? This is a really Lutheran thing that I'm sort of talking about, the pivot between law and gospel, and they're both. There's not one. I think churches have tended to be one or the other too much. Like we're either so grace-filled that we're like everybody can do whatever they want because we love everybody, or else they're like, let's tell everybody all the rules. No dancing, no cards, which no one can ever live up to. Really what we're trying to do is be both. What else, anything you all want to talk about here? I've talked for weeks and weeks about Ecclesiastes and how it takes on this sort of, he's to me, I'm going to say this in an exaggerated way. He's posing as a scribe to tell you how empty what scribes do is. Jesus is combative with the scribes and the Pharisees because they're at it. In this week's gospel, it says that they came and tested him. right? They're using the law, and it's about divorce, and they say, tell us what should happen in divorce. They're using the law to test him. Jesus is sort of all the time he gets himself crucified because he's at odds with it. Ecclesiastes is a different voice. It's saying right in front of us, all the wisdom we think we have doesn't help. And it says, when it does talk about God, God gives it to you to participate in life, to enjoy it, and to let God be God. We're not so good at this. I think there is some responsibility in the table-crawling kid, but there's some responsibility to enjoy the holiday with your family, too. So all that sort of makes sense? What all do you want to talk about with this?
I'm going to read from my little devotional.
Yeah, go for it.
I really
Yeah, you're fine, go for it.
I like this little part. Securing happiness on our own is like trying to catch the wind. We can try to chase it, but it will always remain just out of reach. The Bible teaches us that instead of searching for happiness, we should allow God's joy and peace to reign in our hearts. Instead of striving for the things we think will satisfy, we can learn to find true contentment by looking to God, whatever our circumstance. The Bible often uses the word blessed, which means, oh, how happy. To God, blessed people are happy people, and happy people are blessed. Solomon's father, King David, said, blessed are those whose sins are forgiven, who trust in the Lord, and who draw near to God. The true source of pleasure is God. Don't waste your time trying to catch the wind. Instead, find true happiness by laying hold of the wind maker.
Striving is a law word. The word striving was in what you read. That's a law word. You strive.
You waste your time striving.
Right, but for the
So
word
the sin is
striving,
not good.
right, but the word striving is a law word.
Where are you reading from?
She's reading the thing that her publisher, that the Bible
Yes.
publisher
you're
I
reading-
printed.
have
Oh.
this women's devotion.
It's not-
Oh, you're reading this. Oh, okay.
So it has little devotions that kind
Someone-
of...
Yeah.
A publisher wrote this and put it
Yeah.
next to the
Some of these-
scripture.
Yeah, some of that is part of it, but some of it was also part of Psalm 44 and Psalm 32:1 and Psalm 65:4.
Striving.
They combine it together.
Striving is a law word. So strive to be holy. Strive to look right. Strive to have your stuff put together. Strive for your kids to behave properly. Strive to be medically. That's a law. I'm not telling you that the law is not from God. That's not what I'm saying. That is not the totality of who God is. The law will not save you.
Yeah, that's what it says.
Right.
Instead of striving.
Right. That's what all I'm doing here is sort of connecting what you read to what we're talking about. The law is God's word. I'm not telling you, hey, wisdom is God's word. There are books of the Bible that are about wisdom. That doesn't mean it's not a God-given thing to be prayerful and make good decisions. We prayed for multiple people and facing things that we were like, living in an assisted living. That doesn't mean you can't make good choices, but striving for that to be perfect or the source of happiness will always fail. The right assisted living does not exist. The right home does not exist. The right car does not. I know we strive for those things because we need to get by, but the right stuff does not exist. And striving to follow the law we will always fall short. Happiness is given to us. Joy, it talked about, is given to us. And it belongs to God. And it's not given to us by having striven for it. It's given to us because God chooses to give it to us and God loves us. Ecclesiastes is posing as a scribe, as a wise person, sharing wisdom that says wisdom is a waste of your time. Right? You can hear that that's kind of ironic. He's trying to be a little playful because I think the person knows that scribes and striving and trying to be responsible for other people and all that is vapor. And so he's trying to tell us that. We read this at funerals, and then proceed to tell all these stories at funerals of all the great things the person did. And that's the opposite of what it's saying. We read this text at funerals, and then we give, I do it, I mean, we give these stories that are like, here's what this person did that was exemplary. Like, we can beat off time, stop time from ticking or whatever if we just follow the good things they did. I give almost every funeral sermon sounds like that. That's not what Ecclesiastes is telling you. You cannot strive. There is no striving that will achieve. We talked about, I think it was with Thel, about happiness. And that we talk about, like if you watch commercials on TV, they're medicines that if you take it, you'll be made normal or right. There are things that if you buy, or things that if you gather with family to watch this football game with the right recipe and the right Tostitos, the right Tostitos, then you will be happy. Everything's about how to strive for happiness. What we're talking about here is that happiness is not the totality of the human experience. There's a time to be happy and a time to be sad. But God's joy and groundedness in being loved belongs to God and is ours, and it doesn't come from our striving. Which is, I think, what this.
Well, yeah, because it says you don't do that. The only way to get satisfaction is to look to God, whatever the circumstance.
Yeah.
That's what it says.
The point of the law is to not be fulfilled. For us, the point of the law is to make us say, I can't, my crazy neighbor, I can't be responsible for them. I can't make them do what they should. God help us. Like, God help my neighbor, God help me. Because we got some stuff here. Like, I'm making this up. I mean, this is just a fable. We're fighting over their loud car at 11 o'clock when I'm trying to be in sleep. But they have to go to work, and we're fighting over the rules and the wisdom and the striving, and joy and completeness is not going to come from that. And you get to the point where you have to be like, I pray for that. Like, they're going to work. I pray for them. I pray for me because I'm going to work and I need a night's sleep. Now, how can we be responsible for each other? I could get earplugs and they could maybe back it out in neutral, roll it down. Right? I mean, there's things you can start to think about. I mean, I'm using this as a fable where we do a lot of, hey, you stop running your car that's keeping me up. But it loses, and then all they'll do is be like, I can run my car whenever I want. It loses its ability to communicate. As the Hebrew Bible goes on, as the story progresses of the Hebrew people, it becomes a story less about a community of people that God loves together, and it becomes a story more about what God does for me. The way that we talk about that when we talk about studying Scripture is the rise of individualism. At the start of it, it's God's chosen people. And as time goes on, it gets worried about individual behavior. It's this rise of the individual. Partly who Jesus is a readdressing that creation is God's creation, and thinking that you're more wise than the other person is a spot of more turmoil to you than you know. Thinking that, so this is a real temptation of pastors, right? I mean, I'm tempted all the time to believe I have it figured out and the person talking to me doesn't. That's a spot of no connection, no God work, because, hey, Joey, you don't understand how to read the Bible properly, and I do. Well, all that's going to happen when you do that is this, so tell me what you hear in this scripture, and I'll tell, and I can tell you what this means to me. Well, when we start taking all this responsibility for people, we lose the sort of playfulness of the way Ecclesiastes does this. He's posing as a wise person and telling you wisdom is not good. You sort of lose the sort of tongue-in-cheekness of it. He's posing somewhat connected to scribes, knowing that the rise of scribes and individualism is hurting the way God works, which we see when Jesus comes. Obviously, Ecclesiastes didn't really work. It doesn't fix, you can't fix. God is who fixes. Anything else you want to talk about with this? I mean, I've preached on it a lot now. I've gone over it a lot. We hadn't been in Ecclesiastes a lot, so I wanted to get into the actual book of it. I've spent so many weeks giving you sort of the idea, and now I'm sort of showing it to you. We have a few more minutes, so I'm going to read from 12, and this gets all the way to the end of Ecclesiastes. There are many other interior examples inside of Ecclesiastes of this same trick. The book uses the same trick over and over again. This one, because of how much we've talked about Ecclesiastes, there will be words here that should set off like, oh, I remember talking about that in other weeks, right? I'm going to read in 12, 9 through 14. Besides being wise, Qoheleth also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs. Qoheleth sought to find pleasing words, and he wrote words of truth plainly. Right? So you heard that. Then it says, the sayings of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collective sayings that are given by one shepherd. 9 and 10 is saying the teacher gave you wisdom, right? You can see that in 9 and 10. It's saying the teacher, Qoheleth, this scribe that is putting this book together, gave you wisdom. You can see it in 9 and 10. That's what it says. Then it says, the sayings of the wise are like goads. They're like nails, firmly fixed are the collective sayings that are given by one shepherd. Goads. Do you like being goaded? How does it feel to be goaded? How does the word nail, does that make it seem pleasant?
No.
It's the law. This wisdom is the law. And it's goading you to strive for a thing that you're never going to be able to accomplish. Verse 12. Of anything beyond these, my child, beware. Beware of making many books, there is no end. And much study is a weariness of the flesh. This is a book saying beware of more books. Mm-hmm. There's no end to studying and wisdom and knowing, and this is this goad that'll keep pushing you, but you're never going to find the answer in it. It's vapor. The end of the matter, verse 13, all has been heard. You've already heard the answer. Fear God and keep his commandments, for that is the whole duty of everyone. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. Does wisdom bring out who should have been Uncle Joey with the cigarette or the kid under the table? Does wisdom always figure all this out and solve it all? It says God will bring that out. And to me, this is a study in responsibility and how easy it is to think it's my job to save the guy who just dropped me off at church but won't come in. And I fall into this trap all the time. This is not a looking at you and being like, you do it, I do it. I assume the responsibility. The law is goading him, and the law and him being prayerful, repentant is God's work. Now, I'm not saying I don't play a part in it, But like ultimate responsibility of what happens there, I have to be careful about thinking that I'm the responsible one. I think God is the judge and the responsible one. How do we know that just because he won't come into church with us today that he isn't he may be a perfectly well prayerful, related to God person? I don't know. I mean, but we get wrapped up in that stuff a lot, like the responsibility of it. And it's trying to ease us into faith and being responsible for what we can be responsible for and enjoying the things that are in front of us instead of worrying about our neighbor's car at midnight or 11 or whatever time I said. Can you feel it in that, how it's doing that when you read this? I gave out very early this outline. This is part of what's so hard about Ecclesiastes. These verses are all from different they're added in at different points. They keep jumping around that epilogue, and I showed this to you very early. Those epilogues are added in separate later. Even they are trying to wrestle with they're trying to wrestle with responsibility and how to talk about it. They do. Ecclesiastes wants to give God the power, is talking about the law, but has no resurrection to point to. It has no Jesus came, lived among us, taught this, and resurrected. It can point to that, but it can't teach it because it hadn't happened yet. It's searching for that. It's searching for God's grace instead of God's law. The power of Ecclesiastes is the being goaded by the law. It's saying you're goaded by the law, but it can't set that answer of look to Jesus, that's the answer. But it's setting you up to look for it.
Well, that's what's hard, because we already know.
It's setting up.
Very hard.
It's setting it up. It's setting it up. The law sets us up. The law drives us and goads us to look to God. That's what the law's job is. The law cannot save us. It can point to the thing that does save us. Ecclesiastes is casting about for the way to explain how God is going to save you. It sort of leaves it like it would be like here's the law, here's all the things you should do. Oh, none of those are going to save you. And then it would just be like asking, but what will? Let's look together for what will. And then it's sort of like not. It talks about God, but it doesn't have the grace, the full story of grace and God to all the way explain. The Gospels explain it. The Bible's not just one book by itself. We have all the books. But Ecclesiastes itself can't quite figure out how to answer the problem. It can't figure out how to answer the problem because Jesus is the answer. He doesn't want to answer the problem. He's just pointing. Sometimes pointing a person to the solution is all you can do. You can't take responsibility for them taking it. Hey, I can show you the medicine you should take, but I can't be the one who's here every day to take it. I can show you that you should maybe live in this place, but I can't answer that it might not be an easy place to live in. I can say to you that you should treat other people A, B, C, and D, but I can't make you do. I can't help you or make you do it all the time. All right, what else? You have 5 minutes. So leaving is a grand total of these huge 5 minutes. What do I want to talk about? Next week, we're going to move into 1 John, right? Is that where we're at?
Awesome.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about love a lot if we're going to talk about 1 John. He's all about the love.
Yeah, I'd like to say something about that responsibility
Yeah.
because I was just.
That's a fun thing to think about.
Yeah, I know. It is a very fun thing to think about responsibility. you're a parent and your kids are growing
Yeah.
up, you know, it's your responsibility to help them to live their best lives, to love the Lord and all
Yeah.
that. You know, but you can't make them do as much as you would like to. You can't make them. They have to.
You have to love them enough to back off
Right,
when
to
you
back
need
off, exactly. As
I-
much as you want.
I'm fully aware
do
that as much as I love my kids and as much as I've tried to do the best for them that I can, that I haven't done it as well as I should have. I mean, that's the law.
Yeah.
You should have done, you should have, like, there wouldn't be enough hours in the day for all the things I should have done for it to have gone
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Ultimately, there's faults in their life that's partly my fault. I did things or said things or whatever that I could have done better, but ultimately their faith comes down to, it is communal because I can talk about it, but it's also like I don't go to school with them. So the way they treat the kid in the chair next to them, or the decisions they make, or whether they see God in the math that they're learning or whatever, I can't always, no matter how perfect of a parent I was, I won't have been able to have done that. The law and the striving is not going to be what does it. We don't give up. Like, why? It says eat, drink, and be merry. Why bother with doing anything if it doesn't get you anywhere? We bother because this is where God has set us, and God has called us as God's people and given us gifts, and it's just often we're not good at just enjoying it. We're so wrapped up in the striving that we don't do the enjoying part, which is Ecclesiastes is trying to tell us. Or on the other hand, like, you go to a wedding, and if you stay long enough, you'll see that people are really good at the enjoying part.
Maybe a little too good.
Right.
Just as an
I
aside.
actually like to be gone before that happens.
Yeah, but then there's some walls here, like, you know, I mean, the totality of a marriage is not going to be based on how crazy you can be tonight.